Welcome back, my nomads. Welcome back to another Bitcast. We're back at it again. What's going on, Zach?
Yo, what's going on? Yo, what's around your neck?
It's around my neck, my
Yeah.
necklace. I wear it
Hmm.
every podcast.
I've never seen it.
Yeah,
I
yeah. It's
thought
probably
this is
because
something new, because I know you have to have a thing. You wore hats for a long time. You stopped wearing
ah,
hats. Now you're wearing a necklace.
I've been wearing this necklace since I met you, bro. Well, it
Hmm.
was a different one. My wife bought me this when our daughter was born, but I've always had like a medallion necklace.
All
So
right,
it's
well that's cool. Not too much. So what I wanted to talk about with you, particularly today. Last week I was at the Human X conference for work and saw a lot of interesting stuff that we kind of briefly talked about, and I figured we can kind of touch base on that because it definitely bleeds into every industry now. AI as a whole.
literally, bro. Literally. It's crazy to see the advances that is has come from it. In the beginning when AI first got announced and stuff like Chat GPT, I'm gonna mess that up. Um, I will say that some companies were just blowing shit out of their ass because it wasn't true AI. It was like sophisticated algorithms. But now we're in like the full blown AI sphere or whatever you want to call it, era.
Yeah,
Instead of the age of Ultron, it's like the age of AI or whatever. Well,
yeah,
technically, Ultron was AI, so it is the age of Ultron. But yeah, we're like full blown now. It's getting crazy, man. I'm telling you, the AI is the new WMDs, or they're going to be the new WMDs, man.
yeah.
Like
So
now, people are playing with it a little bit, asking dumb questions, but soon it's going to define countries and governments. If it already hasn't.
you can kind of. I don't think it has to. Not to that kind of space, right? So you can kind of assume anything that's in a public space versus what's private are like completely different. You know what I mean? So
Mm.
like deep down and underground in Google's laboratories, you have something that's probably self-aware, or if not close to being self-aware, kind of like what that whistleblower came out a year or two about. And it's look, ASI, which is kind of like artificial super intelligence, that's the thing that everyone worries about. That's the stuff that was defined in movies, TV shows, books, and then you have AGI, which is general intelligence, which is kind of where it is right now, right? It's kind of like a tool for a lot of things, chatbots, um, using to kind of like, amplify art, all that stuff. And, we
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of microcosms of issues in each kind of individual space. Like, let's use art, for example, right? It's taken away likeness and other artists' work that's published online and using it to train its models. How's that legitimate? There's a lot of gray areas. There's a lot of things that aren't defined of what's usable and what's not, right? It has to have go through the legal process of someone saying something and open up a lawsuit to kind of have it defined, right? And then that's
It's
kind of
kind of
what
like
sets the
theft.
boundaries. Yeah,
It's kind of like theft.
yeah. So once the boundaries are set, which it's going to take a while, it's going to, but I think for the overall picture, it does a lot more good than harm. But like anything, right? Used by the wrong people, it creates the wrong result.
Exactly. It's a tool, and just like it's a hammer in the hands of a construction worker can do good, or in the hands of a serial killer can do bad. So, how is the tool being used is the question, depending on who's wielding it.
Well, let's kind of get
Uh,
into it. Let's because I'm neck deep in this industry, so I have a very good understanding of how this stuff works.
Hmm.
And let's kind of like let's break it down. Let's start with your stuff first, right? In terms of media, news, movies, TV shows, right?
Hmm.
So when I was at the Human X conference, there's you can kind of break it down into several verticals or industries. And one of the main industries is definitely video and image prompts. And it's kind of broken down in a few different categories from there, which is a text to image prompt, meaning you put in this text prompt into a platform, doesn't matter who's making it, right? Let's just
Hmm.
say a cat with a carrot in its hand while smoking a pipe.
Right.
From that text, it's going to create an image with a cat with a carrot and a pipe, right? Or close to it anyway, based on training of trillions of images that's been used to train what a cat is, what a carrot is, what a pipe is, and kind of imagine what it would be, what a cat would be doing with all of those things, right?
Hmm.
Next thing you have is videos, which is kind of broken down into a few more different things, which could be photorealistic, could be CGI, could just be animation, and it's kind of similar. There's a few things like that right now. There's a couple AI companies that are working with movie studios in terms of having the ability of these programs to replace entire staffs of people of creating photorealistic imagery or videos just from a text prompt, which is
Right.
also kind of incredible by itself. But me and you talked about offline, the amount of hardware that this stuff takes it's a lot, right? Like it's law of surface area. Like you need right now, because it's in its infancy stages of it being new, it takes a lot of space and a lot of power and a lot of things to fuel this thing, right? It's kind of like the world's first computer in the
Right.
50s.
Yeah.
It was an entire skyscraper pretty much, and the
Yep.
amount of and it was able to do simple stuff. So it's going to take some time for the hardware to catch up with the software in terms of it being refined, something that's actually easily used, and you don't need like entire rooms worth of GPUs to power the thing, and then you got to cool it. You got to find power sources for it. There's a lot of stuff involved, right?
Hmm.
And I don't see it completely replacing movie industries with that, because not everyone's got a nuclear facility they can use to power these things, and they don't have the
No.
physical space of all the GPUs it would take to make a full movie and replace a team of engineers that would do CGI and have it do it itself.
Look, to piggyback off of what you said, um, to put in to put it in perspective, I don't have the exact numbers, but you remember that movie that came out last year, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, right?
Yeah.
So, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, I can't remember. I know it was nominated. I can't remember if it won the Oscar for um, best CGI. But no matter what I think of that movie, the CGI was amazing, my friend. Like it was
Mm-hmm.
phenomenal. And I remember what's it called? The VFX artist was on a show and he was talking about how much compute power was used for one scene where an ape was in the water. And he said like, oh, I forgot what he said, but it was like a room full of like compute power and graphics cards just rendering out like a minute of a scene took like forever. And so that's just raw video of a bunch of artists creating something to look photorealistic with photorealistic apes. Imagine if AI tried to do that on its own, to compute it on its own, and then
Exactly.
render it
That's a
out.
whole different thing, right? You're replacing an AI with a person, which creates its own power source as itself. on top of creating, it has to collaborate with other models, which has also creates its own power source and its own compute source.
Right.
So you're adding rooms and rooms worth of GPUs just to make something simple versus if it was a person, our GPUs are brain. We don't need to worry about doing that, right? Like, you get
Exactly.
what I'm saying? So I don't see it really ever just replacing the human element for stuff like this. Now, it's a good supplementary piece, right? Like it will probably save a bunch of time in terms of like, doing things in the background, like you see this scene right here, right?
Hmm.
Where, you see like apes in the background, instead of one artist concentrating on making all those apes, maybe the AI can render that piece, right? While you're working on the
Exactly.
main environment, stuff like that.
Exactly. But to convey human emotion in a character that is not human, that's going to need a human touch because human emotion is so the emote of an emotion is so complex that
It's not very good at detecting happy, sad. There isn't, because it's more than just the physically seeing it, right? It's context.
right.
It's the environment, right? Like, there's sarcasm, there's irony, there's things that can contradict that to add more to that
Yes, the
emotion,
nuance of it.
right? Yeah, there's a
Yes.
lot to it, right? It's more than just seeing it. Like, if you see a frowny face, chances of someone being sad, like, there's memes of, Ryan Reynolds with a frowny face, but was he actually sad type of thing? You know what I mean?
Right, exactly. It's so nuanced, it's hard to convey. Like I don't know if you've well you probably have for your profession, right? You've probably seen AI generated like clips of like scenes of things happening
Yeah, of
and
course.
AI has trouble with volumetrics, AI has trouble with simply hands, like digits, fingers, toes. It has a hard time with that. Hell, even humans have a hard time drawing that sometimes. Uh, but it's hard to do little nuanced things, and it's hard to stay consistent. You'll see a lot of flickering, a lot of morphing and transmorphing of things. If you look up close, like you'll see these little things that AI can't really interpret. And so when you're in my field and you do certain things, you'll start to see something that's like, oh, okay, that's definitely AI. Like that's and AI
Yeah,
always has this like polished, like shiny,
yeah.
polished
There's
look.
something off about it, right? Like, you have like an intuition that's like, that's not quite right. You
Yeah,
can't really put your
exactly,
finger on one particular thing, but you're like, that's not quite right.
exactly, exactly. You're like, it's like when you watch a movie and there's bad CGI, but you just can't understand why it's bad CGI. But you're just like, oh, that doesn't look right, man. It looks fake. It's taking me out of it. Same thing with the uh, AI. When you have AI generated things, you're just like, that doesn't look right. But
Now,
yeah,
I'm sure in no time, because you got to think of it, right? The AI generated images and videos is a relatively new thing, and it's gotten really good really quick.
mm,
It's a matter of time before it's pretty much perfected, right? We're not going to have to see that. And at that point, we're really going to have to rely on the platforms themselves, or I guess the providers of these images, to create some kind of watercoloring thing and watercolor mark, some kind of thing inside
yeah.
the code so you can determine if it's real or not.
The best AI generated videos I've seen is literally a talking head. Is somebody sitting like this, just explaining to you, talking and stuff like that. And you can kind of tell when it's fake if you look at the mouth, if you look at the neck, if the muscles in the neck match what they're doing in the scene. It's like little things like that I'm sure maybe AI can solve in the near future. But for right now, AI is still not there, and even though it can do stuff like that, it still needs the human touch to take it to the next level.
I'm
You
sure it's
know.
good with a lot of color. Like
Hmm.
color adds, things that you can't think of, right? In terms of that, like, I'm sure it's super useful for that. Um,
Right.
but I mean, here's the thing, right? You just think of it like this: the amount of time it takes for it to create an environment or like a scene or something is so much quicker than a team of people doing it. It gives you a template for you to build on.
Yeah, I know some because I'm in the indie filmmaking space. I know some indie filmmakers use it as storyboarding. Instead of drawing it by hand, some people don't like to storyboard, so they'll just put
That
a
saves
prompt
money and
in.
time because not everyone's got a AAA
Exactly.
budget, and that gives you at least the starting point of having that type of effects like a AAA studio would.
Exactly. So you just storyboard out your film. You see what it could maybe look like. You pick your shots. You shoot it yourself. Boom, bam, boom. Like you got what you got. So for people like me, it's a good tool. Sometimes if you have to paint something out in the background, like a mailbox or something, it helps there.
Yeah,
Or even
no,
touching up
I'm just
environments.
thinking like just simple like things, right? Just
Right.
like you said, like a mailbox, like a scarecrow in the like a field or something.
Or
Um,
even if you need to put in scheduling, you have to work out an actor schedule versus when the shooting space is available. You can put in your information, and I'm sure there's a program out there that can generate a schedule for your film production. I see these apps that are generated with that use AI generation to complete your whole calendar for the month based on the tasks that you need to get done and stuff like that. So I'm sure it can do it for a film production. So, I see people using like Notion and Motion and certain apps that have that capability using AI, you know.
when it comes to the pricing aspect of it, this is going to be infinitely cheaper in your space for things than what you would normally would pay.
You think?
Yeah,
Um,
because you're paying for
because
a subscription for this platform, right? And
right.
a lot of these things are like rendering in the browser themselves, or you'll
Yeah.
probably be able to have like some kind of API function to your own environment where you have your own coding environment and just do it that way, right?
Right, right.
Which is going to be infinitely cheaper than. I mean, you got to think of it, right? It's not just like physical expense; it's time saved too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Your time is just as valuable as the money spent, and that is money spent, right? Because
Exactly.
that could be concentrated doing other things.
Exactly. Exactly. I think it's interesting though that you work in the environment that you do. You're hands on with AI applications. I work with it a little bit in my field with film, and we both understand that it's a tool. It's that's all it is. It still needs human interaction, human control. Whereas these $1 billion or $1 million companies have gotten rid of all the humans and just decided, hey, we're going to make stuff with just AI. And it's like, do you understand what that really entails? Because I don't think you do, because it still needs
Give an
that human
example.
touch. Well, like what? Like Netflix having a AI gaming generating what's it called? I can't think. Studio or company or
Yeah, yeah.
and then it ain't doing so hot. I mean, the chief has left the company. I see, um, but it doesn't seem like it's doing that hot. Do you know of anybody who's played any of their AI generated games? Netflix.
I didn't know they even did that until you said something to me earlier.
So I have Netflix, and bro, as soon as you open it, they are advertising so hard for their games. They like put it up front at the top of the thing. I'm like, yo, I don't want to play games. Like, I came here to watch. Go to my continue watch section. Like, come on, man. Like, they're really trying to get people to play the games, and I'm just like, no. Why would I? Why would I play a game? First of all, why would I play a game from a filmmaking company who was struggling with their own films a couple years ago? That's one. Two, why would I play an AI generated game when the gaming industry is struggling, period? Like they can't get things right. So like I told you the other day, I was playing Avowed, trying it out on Game Pass, and it just wasn't hitting it for me. So you know what I did? I went and played Splinter Cell Chaos Theory, a game that's what 20 years old, maybe more years than 20.
I
Like
did tell you some good ones that are current now that are worth the time.
yes, she did. Yes, she did.
It's kind of interesting. So Nvidia had a demo out for like what they're using AI applications in video games. One they showcased was this like big boss against this like squad of enemies, like players. They're all teaming
Mm-hmm.
together against this boss. This AI is actually like, and the boss fight's different every time because it's like fighting against another person every time, right? Like the strategy changes. Everyone's got different strategy, and it will adapt to you. So it kind of like targets who to attack first, depending on strength, weaknesses, the kind of player type they are, if they're like a healer or something like that, and they will target based on support units versus assault units, things like that, right? So there's definitely going to be real world application on this sooner rather than later, because how many times do you play a game and like the AI for the NPCs is just completely off?
So I'm glad you brought that up because you're right, that does happen. Um, just for clarification, when we've been playing video games forever, I mean, well, you and I, video games have been a thing since we've been born. Um, every time a new game was coming out, I remember back in the day reading Game Informer, and then they would have a spread of a game that's supposed to come out and a whole special look into it, and you would read, they'd be like, and this time around, the enemy AI is worked out great. Da da da. So, for clarification, when back in the day, 90s, early 2000s, when they talked about enemy AI, was it true AI or enemy algorithms?
No, see, it's back then it wasn't even algorithms. Back then it was kind of like a coded.
If
It was
then
kind of
situation.
it was kind of like a coded thing where it has like a few lines of code and it would do a circle of things or like a
Hmm.
subset of moves or behavior.
Yes. So like a if and I went to initially I went to school for coding, and the coding I learned, I think it was C plus or something like that. It's if then situations where if this happens, the application does this. If this happens, then this or this. Those simple lines of code. So my thing is this too. Do we have a certified definition of AI? Because you know how companies like food companies will say this has zero sugar, and it's like, yeah, it doesn't have sugar, but it has high fructose corn syrup in it. You know how they get away with stuff like that.
Yeah.
In this broad language, do we have a certified explanation of AI that companies have to follow to promote their product as AI powered?
So yeah, well, I mean, I feel like AI is kind of like this generalized term now, right? And it's an all-encompassing thing, and it's evolved from what the previous term was. I think that's the number one thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, all right, I'll give you a great example of characters that like enemy models. It's interesting, and let's use Elden Ring or Dark Souls as a good example. This is a perfect example.
Mm-hmm.
They're difficult, right? But there's a
Right.
set pattern to them to beat them. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean it's AI because they're not adaptive. None of them are adaptive, right? There's like a
Mm-mm.
phase one, phase two type of thing.
Yes.
We don't have, we don't, right now in the space, you don't have like a truly adaptive enemy that's like kind of evolving with your play style and then doing its own thing and making decisions there. There's always like a predetermined set of things
Mm-hmm.
it's going to do.
Hitboxes and stuff like that.
Exactly. Um, so I'm curious to see how this is going to work, right? Because here's the thing: what if it gets too hard? Can you take it down a couple notches in terms of the self learning thing? Like we're getting to a point now because right now you have the difficulty. Most games are like easy, normal, hard.
Mm-hmm.
Some games don't have anything, i.e., Elden Ring. It's just a set difficulty depending on whatever, right?
Right.
So how are people going to adjust and enjoy it if it's something that's like it's going to be fiercely challenging? Because people like you don't like to have a challenge. You're in for the story. Not everyone's in to sweat for 30 minutes fighting something.
Yeah, I wonder about that too. Because I also wonder, the question is, if we can, should we? Because, as you said, we have easy, normal, hard modes in games already that don't need AI to generate it. I would assume for video games to have AI generated NPCs, you would need them to have internet access the whole time you're playing the game. So that means you would have to have good internet. Not everybody has fast, high speed, you know, fiber optic internet. So in order to fight this NPC, it might slow down your system. It might slow down. It might take off some frame rates in the game. You know, you go from 60 to 30 once you walk into the room and try to fight this boss because it's an AI generated boss, learning your playstyle. And then on top of that, one doesn't know how to hold back so that the player doesn't get too frustrated. One doesn't know to crank it up because this player is just beating it so easily. That in itself is a problem, and I wonder, because video games have a lot of code in them, if that would mess up some of the coding in the game, slow it down, cause glitches, or what. Like, I think that's a slippery slope, especially with those huge games like you were talking about the other day. These huge games have glitches for a reason because they're massive, and it's just hard to, account for everything. Imagine if you have a enemy, an NPC that's just even a surprise to you as the developer because you're not controlling it. You're not controlling the story, the code, anything like that. That I don't know. That sounds weird, especially in a time where people are complaining about how their games need a connection to the server 24/7. Especially if we're playing a single player game. It's like, why do I need to be connected to the server now? I don't think people would want an AI generated character. I might be biased because I'm a casual gamer, but you are a hardcore gamer. What would you want?
I guess it depends on the game.
Hmm.
Like is it like a sim, like a sports sim, where it's going to be realistic that game plans in terms of like how the game's going or whatever, or the player's intelligence changes the aspect of the game. That would be cool. But how do you
Hmm.
emulate that? Everyone's got unique views and habits. How do you accurately portray that, right? If it's something that's fantasy or whatever, um, I think we should see how it works with like lower level stuff first without everything on, right? Like just kind of have it set to like normal enemies just kind of have like some kind of basis of like adaptability, things like
Hmm.
that. I think there's going to be too many people not enjoying that full aspect of it, and I don't know what it would look like in terms of difficulty based on difficulty levels. How much it will change? Does it reduce the adaptation? Does it reduce the ability to look for things that it normally wouldn't? Stuff like that.
But do we need that? Because, as you said, we already have that
Yeah, I
without
know.
all that
I don't know if
generating.
I
And
don't know if we necessarily. I mean, it would be cool to have that as its own setting. How about that?
it would be. I just feel like the cost would be just too much because the company would
I
have to
don't
have a
see it being
dedicated
any different
server.
than what it is now because really you're just adding a script into there. You get what I'm
That's
saying?
true because all these games are live service games anyway. So they already
Exactly.
have servers for people to be on them. Um, I guess it would be one less thing to code, unless you would have to code barriers in it so the
Yeah.
AI doesn't go crazy in the game. So you would just be coding like, "Hey, don't do this or don't do that." Stay in your lane so you don't affect any other part of the game. But yeah, I don't know if that's necessary if you already have things like different modes, and it would just add more computing power to the hardware. And I don't know. I'm a casual gamer, so that just seems like excess to me. But I don't. I do see a company doing this just for the fact to say, "Hey, we got the first AI generated boss. All our bosses are AI generated," just for the sake of saying it, whether it's good or not, whether they tested it or not. To be like, "Oh, we're the first company to do this," and they advertise it that way. They advertise the game that way, you know. But yeah, I definitely seeing that happen. And to what you said earlier about the cost, for me, I think it's going to go up just because of the hardware capabilities, how much it costs to house these servers and these GPUs. I feel like we're in the phase now when like all these streaming services during the pandemic were born, like Max, Peacock, Paramount Plus, where they were all like $5 from the start, and you got 4K content streaming at $5, and everybody was happy. And then a couple years later, over the years, they the prices increased. And while the prices increased, the quality decreased. You didn't get 4K anymore. You got 1080 or you got 720p. I'm looking at you, Netflix, for their baseline plus ads on top of that. But you're paying $20 a month. So it's like I kind of see it like that, where everybody's like, "Hey, for $5 you can taste what we got, and once you get to
Yeah.
taste, you'll be hooked, and you're gonna want to pay us $20 later, But yeah, I see this is going. I think it's going to be a higher cost a little later because of, man, like all these servers and GPUs that need to be used. The compute power for AI is crazy, and a lot of times the average consumer is just using it for like bullshit, like, oh, I
It's
just
true.
want to
Yeah.
show me Donald Trump kissing Elon Musk's feet, Like,
Yeah. Some weird stuff like that. Yeah.
yeah, I saw that the other day,
These
and
people
it
are
was quite
crazy.
disturbing. I'm like, who would make that? Like, why would you make that? I uh, I don't know. People are weird, but yeah, I think it's going to go up, but I could be wrong. I'm probably wrong, but yeah, man, I don't know. I I just try to reiterate to people because people always ask me because of what I do, are you afraid of AI? And I'm like, no, because it's a tool. You know, you're still going to need the human touch.
I see it being as important as splitting the atom in terms of it being mainstreams. Like this is a
Hmm.
very important milestone, right? Like this can do a lot. There's a lot of different
Oh
things it could be used
yeah.
for.
There's a reason why all these different countries are putting money into this, man. They're going to be the new WMDs. People don't understand. This is how they're going to do information warfare. Why have a hot war when you can have a cold war run by an AI system instead of your generals or whatever, your spy entities? You just have an AI algorithm, you know, doing the work for you,
Hmm.
brainwashing your enemies' uh, citizens. It's nuts. But yeah, this AI stuff is, I think, getting a little out of hand. But I'm also not afraid of AI because we have one thing as human beings that I don't think we'll ever have, but it could: generalization. If AI ever starts to generalize, then we're in trouble. Because that's something that we humans have that scientists still can't explain how we have it. Generalization. For those who don't know what I mean, there's a reason why you can tell the difference between a chair and a table. There's a reason why, even though they both have four legs, they both walk on four legs, they have a nose, a tail, you could still tell the difference between a cat and a dog, or an aardvark and a dog. Like, we have this general information of things, and we still can't understand how we have this information. Like, my 2-year-old can tell the difference between a cat and a dog, or a chair and a whatever. You know, it's it's amazing. Philosophers have brainstormed about this. Scientists have tried to look this up, but we all, as humans, have this collective information that we can just generalize. We can tell the difference between things, even if they look the same or whatever, look alike. Once machines can do that, we're in trouble, man. We are in trouble. But until then, I ain't worried about it.
Well, you said it's WMD, so it's either you should worry about it or you're classifying it wrong.
Oh well, what I mean, like, I'm not gonna worry about it. I'm not gonna worry about it Terminator style. I'm not gonna worry about it
It's not going
Skynet
to.
style.
I don't see that getting to that point because it's one of those things where it's hardware limitations, right? Like there's a lot that has to get to that point, and hardware is like kind of keeping that in check. Like it's going to take a long time for us to really have private enterprise included to condense all of this stuff, right? Like Microsoft, uh, allegedly has the first quantum processor, right? But you got to keep this thing in like an absolute zero temperature type of thing. This is not something that can be used in like a mainstream thing. So the one
Yeah.
thing that can do this on a very simple level that's very small requires a room to be colder than any physical limit known to man. Right? So I mean, it's colder than deep space. I mean, that's not exactly sustainable for the average person or the consumer, you know?
No.
So this is how you get to the Skynet thing is it has to be an everyday consumer type of accessible, right? You can't have all of this stuff and have like rooms full of hardware. It doesn't work like that. The hardware is going to have to be chopped down a lot. Like it took a long time for us to get to the microprocessor when computers were made. That was a 40-year, that was a 30, 40-year, advancement in making. Like hardware like this is another one of those things. Like there are physical limitations, right? So we're at a point where the physical hardware is pretty much maxed out of what it's able to do, right? Like we can size it down and do some like some good things in terms of making the cooling easier, making conductivity a little better and all that, but it's not going to be a revolutionary like amazing thing. Like the next step is something that we're just not there yet. We're talking about organic materials and stuff like that that's being used, and we're nowhere near
Yes.
that, right?
We're still in this, like, hard metal, you know, like, hard metal industrial time, or whatever it's called. Like, until there's like a new material that's developed. Like, I don't know if you saw this movie called Ex Machina, starring Oscar Isaac.
Yeah, of course.
Remember in that movie, he had to develop a new material to house an AI.
Of course.
Yeah, it was like a organic gel type of thing, and
Yeah.
he kind of mirrored it after the human brain. Until
Yep.
we can develop something along those lines, it's not going to happen, because the human
No.
brain is the most advanced
That's the reason why
supercomputer.
exactly. That's the whole thing about us is that like we have amazing compute power, all in organic material, and it's relatively small for what it's able to do. No piece of hardware can do that.
It makes no sense how we can do the things we can do with our brain, and most of us are just like killing our brains away, doing nothing in our lives. But it's amazing what the human brain can do. And I look at like I used to watch this. Well, I love this anime called Psychopass. And spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the anime, it's like 10 years old or whatever. They used actual human brains to do their AI powered uh, thing that ran the city. Their AI powered thing, and it made sense to me back in the day because I was like, oh yeah, because the human brain's like the most complicated computer microprocessor or whatever. It's a supercomputer. It's a quantum computer in our freaking brains. And if you find ways to sustain the human brain outside of the body, I guess you could potentially run a whole citywide computer generated AI to govern us all on that. But yeah, until we get to that point, I don't think it's gonna happen, bro. Like, nah, not with this hardware that we got. It's too limited, too limited, and we're still going in the same way. Instead of thinking about different materials, we're still like, oh, we're gonna make the same. We're gonna make a better microprocessor, but with the same materials. Like, I don't think so, bro. You're gonna have to look at something different than that. I don't.
Exactly, and I mean, it's like I said, like, law of surface area, like this is a physical limitation. There's just so much you can do that inorganic materials can do. It's just how it is, right? Like, and that's but when we cross that threshold, or if you're going into a whole different ethical problem of life and all this, and is this something you really want to go down?
Do you see it going in the way of certain genetic practices, like cloning's illegal here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or stem cell research is illegal here to a degree,
Well,
right?
it's legal. It's just how you get it, right? Is the
Right, right, right. So, do
um,
you see it going down that road? Because a lot of AI is just learned machine learning from other
well,
things,
I mean,
proprietary things.
because you gotta have to understand this, right? Like, it's two things. So we're pretty much going against China in terms of like this AI race. China's
Yeah,
got the advantage in terms of consolidating and forcing collaboration, private enterprise with government. Would you
right.
trust China with this, or would you rather trust the United States and the private enterprise with this? Like, that's the question you have to ask yourself, right? And
Hmm.
for me personally, having China as the the one to control this first and do this, like, I that doesn't make me feel comfortable at all.
Right.
So like, what do we have to do to maintain some level of ethical dignity, I guess, right? Responsibility while still winning the race. Like, there has to be a fine line. Like, look, we can't just get in caught up in, virtue and just saying like, oh, we're going to take the virtuous path. Let's just win, we'll win this. That's not going to help you win this. Like, you have to get down and dirty and do things to win. Like, it's kind of like the same thing as like a war, right? Like, a lot of people are willing to point fingers and say a lot of stuff that's really naive, and it's great and ideal and all, but it's like, that's not realistic. That's not how it really operates. You got to be very pragmatic with this, and I just don't think a lot of the critiquers aren't pragmatic in understanding that they would rather lose. But I was like, but you understand what it is if we did lose. There's a lot of stakes involved with this stuff, and it's like that's not a risk that I would be comfortable taking.
It's so it's funny that you brought up war because exactly when you said people want to have this moral high ground, but like it made me think about when Obama uh, outlawed torturing
Torture.
prisoners, and they
We
was like,
did
"Oh,
it
we got to
right.
be." So you know how we worked around that? Like
Yeah,
we,
we just sent it to allies, buildings and bases and stuff. So we would
right,
send captured insurgents to enhanced interrogation sites, meaning that it was really just a building or base that was owned by the British or French, and then we can torture in there. That's all it was.
Yes, exactly. So I wonder if this AI, because like you said, it's a national
But
security
there is
situation.
no shackles. Like Trump and Vance did the right thing. They pretty much let this like we got to win this. They're doing it the
Hmm.
right way. They're letting private enterprise do this. Government's creating subsidations for whoever wins this
Hmm.
and getting the money for it. That's the right way to do this because you don't want the government being in control of this type of technology and things either, especially when majority of politicians on Capitol Hill don't even know how to regulate it. They don't know anything about it. So the last thing you want is them on the fire button, so to speak, on this type of thing.
Oh, so we don't have that issue of the United States trying to be like the moral high ground in the situation.
Well, right now there isn't any. It's just that this stuff is just right now the ethical aspects of it is just
Mm.
licensing of people's likeness, and it's coming down more into civil stuff versus criminal.
Okay.
So this is purely monetary stuff, right? Like ownership, copyright infringement, things like that. We haven't really
Mm.
crossed an ethical boundary. Now there are nonprofits that do stuff on the back end to make sure these companies are doing things on an ethical level, right?
Right.
However, it's not like this is a mandatory thing.
Okay. Okay. Because I was interested in that to see like as a country, as like what's the government going to do? Because it is something we have to win, like you said. But it also, America likes to act like it's the moral circumference for the world. you know.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Like it's virtue. They want to be
Yeah.
virtuous. There's a lot of people who want to be virtuous while being okay with the fact if we don't win and everything. It's like, do you not understand what the alternative is? Because you've never lived in a world where someone who is like someone's whole idea of how life should operate and how global order should operate is completely different than ours. Like, look, the United States has done bad things and all this stuff, but if you're okay with China doing this, that's I can't say anything about it. Like that's it's
Yeah, and I definitely said circumference instead of moral compass. But
yeah.
yeah, I totally agree, man. Like it's definitely the war of nations right now, and we
It's a
gotta
new
do what we
space
gotta do.
race.
Yeah, we gotta do it. And not to mention, hey, if they're doing the new space race and it helps me make my films better, I can get with that too. you
There's a lot of things
know?
that we have to understand. Like we have to understand something like the dominance of space travel stuff like this. Like people are like, well, it doesn't pay for my groceries. Like I understand, but this is important stuff, right? Like we're constantly evolving, and we're pretty much at a point now where the world's pretty much super reliant and codependent on each other in terms of trade and being connected. Like that's not disappearing ever, So
No,
we have to understand that if we want to stay on top, there's some things we have to do to remain there.
exactly. I feel like that's a whole different discussion.
Yeah,
People moral high ground while they're enjoying their Starbucks coffee with their cell phones that was made in, certain
China,
countries on, but that's a whole different discussion.
but it
but
bleeds into each other, right?
yeah, yeah, I just thought this was interesting how there's an AI generated thing for Aloy, like, and fans are having a trouble with this. So it's like an AI generated thing where you can talk to Aloy, the character from the game, just ask her questions, and people are like, "Bro, this is literally what you're fighting against in the game is AI generated monsters, basically, machines." And now you controlled her into put her in. You made her an AI application. I think it's ironic, that Sony would do this and Insomniac. Well, not Insomniac. Insomniac. No,
It's
Guerrilla
no
Games.
Naughty Dog. I thought.
No, Guerrilla Games does
Mm,
Horizon Zero Dawn. But I thought that was interesting. You know, I feel like they chose her because we talked about the soft line. Sony's really trying to make her their character, even though people aren't really messing with her. You know, and the game Horizon Zero Dawn after all the changes they made. But I just thought this was interesting and relevant to what we were talking about.
mm-hmm.
You take a character that's like making John Connor into a AI bot where you can just ask him questions and have conversations with him. It's like, that's kind of
Yeah,
uncanny valley.
yeah.
I don't know if that works, but I thought that was funny.
Well,
Yeah,
I
I don't
thought
know.
this was a good conversation.
Yeah, man, it's AI is yeah, it's here to stay, and we just gotta live with it. You know, a lot of people were afraid of it like a year back. It's come out, and you know, things keep rolling, things keep moving. Now we're having AI generated phones and laptops and stuff, and you know, I mean, look, were filmmakers afraid when every cell phone had a camera in it? No, you know, because just because you have the capabilities of doing something doesn't mean you're going to do it. How many filmmakers are there now? Still not that many compared to the millions of people
Right,
who have phones that
right,
automatically
exactly.
adjust their settings and shit. So you know, take that how you will. You know, but I hope you learned something, my nomads. Yeah, AI is not that scary, so relax. Peace. Be creative.